So the Torvians, or the mining colony which would become the Torvians, landed on their new planet, which they named Torvis after my mother, Dr. Torvitska, because it was her science that helped them, that made it possible for them to arrive on their new home planet. And they were successful in colonizing the planet, obviously, because here I am. So now we jump forward in time after I was born and raised and had a few children of my own. I am on my way to a new planet that we kept getting signals from, radio signals, television signals. So we needed to begin commerce and interaction with other humans. So I'm headed for this new planet in my little crystal cruiser, which is powered by, of course, my mother's technology that brought us to Planet Torvis. After my space jump from Torvis, I was anxious to put my feet on solid ground. I wasn't cut out to be a space traveler. I love the ground and the smell and feel of dirt and rock. I love the sunlight from Torvis's two suns and the steady constant of the desert winds driving the power turbines. Looking into the night sky was as unfamiliar an act to me as traveling through space. I had never done either. Since I had never seen any planet from space but my own, I was not sure what to expect and certainly wasn't ready for the breathtaking beauty of the blue-green globe getting larger in my viewer. I was subconsciously expecting to see a dry planet, like my own beloved Torvis. The amount of water on the surface of the planet amazed me. I was suddenly feeling a bit unsettled, wondering whether or not I would have to land in water. I didn't know how to handle water, and my sensors showed an incredible amount of it. Besides, I was nowhere near properly equipped to deal with what I had been taught to understand was an ocean. My concern was unfounded, as I could see, upon getting closer to the planet. I found what I was looking for on the edge of a large area of vegetation, probably what I had come to understand was a forest or a green belt. What I finally saw was a large desert area. Now that was something I knew I was prepared for. This would suit my purposes perfectly, so I checked the coordinates and waited till night arrived on that side of the planet to begin my descent into atmosphere and gravitational pull. This planet, as I had come to learn from the signals that we received, was named Escalor, and the atmosphere rose to about 30,000 feet above sea level and was teeming with all different kinds of aircraft. My scope was alive with them. But as I traveled toward the desert area that I had chosen as my landing site, the quantity and frequency of these craft dwindled to nothing. This was exactly what I had been hoping to find, especially after my long discussions with the ancients back on Torvis. They had warned me to be extremely cautious and not use the available spaceport facilities. I must at all costs be perceived as a local citizen of Escalor. They wanted no possible track back to Torvis. Ours is a society with a strong but delicate balance, and the smallest detail could very well upset its equilibrium. Besides, the style and construction of my ship would certainly be cause for great curiosity and concern if I were to use the spaceports. I had consulted my children, who had coined the name Crystal Cruiser for it. I just called it my cruiser. It is a spaceship constructed almost entirely of rock. It is quite beautiful, being almost completely transparent, because the crystal used for its construction is of that nature. It had been cut and welded entirely by blue light lasers and performed quite satisfactorily. Possibly the greatest advantage to this type of technology centered around the fact that it was entirely invisible to the tracking devices on Escalor. Even the motive power technology was untraceable since it was based on the Torvian magnetic frequency drive. As I was finding a landing spot, concentrating on settling down easy so as not to raise any dust, I did not realize just yet how much I would come to appreciate my ship's attributes as my life on Escalor marched on through the years. I nestled my beauty in close to a large rock outcropping, making sure to place her in such a way as to avoid the dawn sun, yet allow me to cover it with loose rock and desert debris. This would make my ship almost invisible to the casual passerby, if in fact there were any such thing, this far out in the desert wasteland. It seemed to me, as I scanned the planet on entry into its atmosphere, that all life was concentrated very heavily in several large but obviously overpopulated areas. I had seen no signs of life or activity for many miles in any direction from my parking spot. I was content that I had made a good choice. As I climbed from my ship and breathed the air of a different planet for the first time, my senses were alive as I had never experienced them. I realized for the first time in my life I was experiencing the natural human reaction to danger. It was exhilarating, to say the least. I could see how this type of activity might become addictive if I were the obsessive type of personality. An overwhelming aroma of a myriad of unfamiliar yet tantalizing scents were being carried to me on the wind coming in from the green belt I had observed to the west as I was landing in the twilight of the single sun. That, and the phenomenon of dark night, were experiences I intended to take some serious time examining. Above me in the black velvet sky were brilliant billions upon billions of pinhead-sized dots of light. I could even see one of the star constellations I had used to navigate to Escalor. This was an experience I had not counted on. Looking at this breathtaking night sky that covered me like a lid of a cooking pot from horizon to horizon, I was enthralled. I would have to be very careful if I were to pass as an Escalorian. They had grown up with this sky, and most of them probably never took the time to even notice it for its mind-bending depth of beauty. I eventually fell asleep in my pilot's seat, staring with Torvian joy at this first of many wonders I was certain were in store for me. The Torvians' study of happiness and joy was as important to them as was the study of language or calculations. The emotions and acts of happiness and joy were not considered a byproduct or an accident of another activity. They were addressed as a complete and complex philosophy of their own, with exercises and studies directly relating to the application of happiness and joy in every social activity. Consequently, the entire realm of Torvian activity, from social graces to industrial and business skills, were deeper, more precise, and executed with a passion and brilliance found nowhere else in any galaxy, solar system, or planet known. This was also in my genetics, and thus it was in my DNA. I am brilliant because I enjoy it. I am precise and quick-witted because I love it. And I am healthy and strong because it brings me the joy of life every morning. With this kind of mentality and strength of body and will, any outcome of a future contest of wills between me and the power lords of Escalor would never be in question. I had all the time in the solar system to study them and learn their weaknesses. Meanwhile, they didn't even know they were in a war for the very way of life they so lusted after. My best and most precious asset is my deep love of life and all those who wanted to make a better life for themselves. I honor that desire above all else and would apply my vast mental and physical capabilities to help make the changes that will bring about the overthrow of the enslaving power lords who only see people as a means to an end. My ancestral Torvian society revolves around the quartz crystals, the centerpiece of our survival and lifestyle. They were used in the teaching of the young and in the philosophies of the ancients. To look at a crystal and watch the sunlight reflected in its many facets was the first life lesson taught by the ancients to the young. The ancients were a group of the original Mars colonists, older than 1,200 Earth years, who governed the planet and were greatly honored and respected. It was their most sacred and coveted duty to gather the younger of the children together and begin their life lessons with the crystalline philosophy. This was the teaching that just as the crystal shows the light in many ways and never the same, so each person on Torvis would add to or change the planet and its people in some positive, creative way. Consequently, each child born on Torvis was an integral and critical part of the whole and spiritually connected to the planet. They each had their important task to perform, and the health and happiness of the planet in some way depended on them doing this task to the very best of their capabilities. This gave each of them such a feeling of self-worth and belonging that the social disasters of most other planets were never present on Torvis. No crime, no wars, no greed. This is not to say that there were no disagreements, for there were many. The Torvians were a strong and aggressive people. But they used thought first, then words, and lastly deeds to handle disagreements. Never is violence even considered as an alternative, because violence comes from fear, and the Torvians are a fearless race. We actually have to study fear, greed, avarice, and violence, and hatred, just to be able to understand them. These emotions are completely foreign to Torvians, yet as intellectuals and philosophers, We want to learn all we can about such feelings and the activities which are the natural consequence of these emotions and actions in humans. My first sunrise on a water planet astonished me till words would not come. I had never dreamed that the sky could be so magnificent in so many different ways in such a short time. My eyes wouldn't leave the sky until Escalor's single sun winked at the edge of the horizon and startled me from my hypnotized state. I needed to get moving before full light so I wouldn't be seen near my ship. I dragged a large Horca scale cloak behind me to erase my tracks so that would have no tracks in the rock and gravel of the desert. I remembered I had seen a green belt to the west of my position, and my highly developed sense of smell told me I was right. It had been a lush green river delta, falling away to vast open grasslands that changed from green to brown as they gradually became the arid desert region I was quite comfortable with. I was delighted by the air from that direction, laden with the moisture and strange but exciting scents I had tasted in my nostrils before falling to sleep. Yet, even the desert of this beautiful place had a myriad of tough, gnarled shrubs, stubby trees, and tufts of brown grasses. I was intrigued because Torvis is completely barren of vegetation, growing only rock and crystal formations, great sparkling spires piercing the sky for hundreds of feet. I wasn't sure how far I would have to travel, but I knew for sure it wasn't more than 3 days on foot. Being from a hot desert planet, I was not the least bit concerned about that long of a walk in this environment. Besides, I was just going to get my bearings, then rest till dark. I could travel just as easily in the starlight as in the hot sun. As I strode through the sandy gravel and rocks of the landscape, I went over my plan and my strategy, talking out loud to myself, just to get it set hard in my mind. I knew I must research this planet well before approaching anyone with the crystalline technology. In the first place, basic understanding of the Escalorian economy was essential. I must discover what the driving force behind the planetary economy was, to then be able to know the kind of business and people I would be dealing with in trade agreements for Torvis. The ancients had warned me of the kinds of people I would be meeting. I would meet men of greed and lust for power who would do anything to own and control the technology of Torvis. If this was in fact true, I must be very careful. To be perceived as a harmless bumpkin, easily influenced and used. Yes, this would be good. Being underestimated would put me at an advantage in every situation. I would develop this character and use it to my best advantage. I figured I must find myself a job on a farm or a ranch to learn the traits of the people I was to become. Then, as I became more accustomed to the planet's social customs and traditions, I could better fit this character into my plan. Since research was another of my passions, I was excited to learn all I could about this new society I was about to enter. It was exhilarating to consider how much I would learn about my own and Torvis's past, since the two planets were connected in their ancient histories. Early in the pre-dawn of my second night on Escalor, I was skirting a small plateau to my left, concentrating on the ravine ahead when the plateau fell away to a valley. My senses were tingling before I actually saw the lights and early morning activity of a large encampment of tents, huts, and cave dwellings. I stopped in my tracks to search with my senses, but found nothing threatening in the small desert village. People were speaking in low tones, a dog barked a good morning, and someone coughed off in the distance. Obviously, they were completely unaware of my presence and not even wary of having visitors. This was an interesting and intriguing phenomenon, and my razor-sharp analytical mind began to process the possibilities of having this group of people as an asset. I would return with a proper introduction and research this area and these people more thoroughly.